Welcome back. You're still on Hot Seat with Akintaya, and we are asking, can homosexuality ever be embraced in the African culture? What do you think? Send us your comments on Twitter at hotseat_vox. Email us, hotseat@voxafrica.com, and join us on facebook.com/hotseat on Vox. Okay, let's go back to the panelists in the studio first. Let me see. You are heading a protest against homophobia outside the Nigerian High Commission. Can you tell us more about your crusade?
Yeah, on May 17th, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, we are going to be having an outside event right outside the Nigerian Embassy with the theme, "We Are Family, Freedom to Love for All Nigerians." Okay. So we are going to have Nigerians in diaspora. It's organized by the Nigerian LGBTIs in diaspora against anti-same-sex law. It is a group I coordinate, and it is an outside protest group that is against the anti-same-sex laws and sodomy laws in Nigeria, and talking about the decriminalization.
Okay, let's go back to the phone. Stephen, would having a gay couple as your neighbors be a problem for you?
I've known lots of homosexual people in my time, and it's not a matter of who's who's living next door to you or not. It's who is actually passing the laws, and and who is behind it all. And I've done a little bit of research into the funding for homosexual groups in Africa, and virtually without exception, they're all funded from the West. There is no appetite for homosexuality in Africa, and the money's coming from organisations like the Ford Foundation, people like George Soros and the Open Society, HEVOS in the Netherlands, the Arcus Foundation of the homosexual John Stryker in the States. That's where the money is coming from. And if African countries,
well, can I just say that I might protest
that money, then they would do themselves a great favour. It's all being funded by Western homosexuals.
Okay,
it's not all being funded, by the way, because the Nigerian LGBTI in diaspora is a group of Nigerians who have come together to do something from their own pocket, from their own resources, and to march without any funding from anyone.
Okay.
So it's not all about funding.
And to add to that, Stephen, you rightly said so. Those names that you've listed, but don't forget that more than 50% of trade money coming into Africa are coming from the West as well. So if you talk about funding for LGBTI people, more than 70% of faith-based funding coming into Africa is coming from the West. So when you have your argument, try not to be one-sided, because the problem I always have with you, Stephen, is you are a one-way traffic man. You always have your argument one way. You don't reason both ways. If you come up here and mention organizations that are funding LGBT organizations in Nigeria, can you as well mention faith-based organizations from America and from Europe that are funding faith-based organizations in Africa as well? Because it goes both ways.
Especially faith-based organizations that are anti-men, anti-homosexuality, and also anti-women's rights too, in terms of contraceptions.
Stephen, you can have the floor, please.
But if you have to be very careful also about organisations promoting women's rights. I know of one called Moving the Goalposts that operates in Kenya, and that's taken girls to the World Cup final and all sorts of things. Now, when they get back to their village, the elders aren't going to be able to tell those girls anything. The white man's taken us down to South Africa, given us all this, given us what do you know? So things like that are actually counterproductive to the.
Let's have Stephen.
Stephen. And of course, I don't know about West Africa, but in Kenya there's a massive problem with sex tourism.
Let's get back to the studios. Bisi, is it not logical to think that being gay is a matter of choice, not because you were born that way? Is it a natural occurrence or a matter of choice?
Okay, can I just say this? If it's by choice, let me take that for a first step. Is it not my right to have a choice? And if I have a choice, who are you to challenge my choice, my rational choice? And now when we move a little step forward, can we not say heterosexuality is a choice? Because then if homosexuality is a choice, that means that you have a choice between being straight and being gay. So straight people having a choice between being straight and being gay. So sexuality as a whole, what we are trying to say is sexuality as a whole is a choice. But even if it is a choice, because that's a debate for another day, if it is a choice, it is not your responsibility to respect my choice, the way I want to live my life, without you interfering or having an opinion on what you think is best for me. Because this is me now. It doesn't have anything to do with you.
Okay.
So the issue of choice of nature is, you know, if we start that, we're not going to leave the studio.
Okay.
But I don't want to drag
All right,
us into
let's
that.
move to Yemisi quickly. Looking at homosexuality and religion in Africa, the Sharia law in northern Nigeria prescribes the death penalty for a gay couple. A lesbian gets 6 months in prison and 50 lashes of the cane. Is that not too harsh or irrational?
It is very irrational. It is very illogical. First, we have to say the religion is not our constitution. It's not our constitutional law. I was born into a Christian family. I was a Christian, but I am an atheist. But I'm not succumbed to religious dogmas or religious law. I'm governed by the constitution of the country. And that is what we should be talking about, not religious law. People shouldn't make their religion our law. And there should be that secular separation from state and religion.
Okay.
And apart from that, talking about sexual orientation being a choice, first, I always ask people, well, maybe you are an heterosexual. Maybe the day you made your choice, when you can tell me when exactly you choose to be an heterosexual person, then I will tell you when I chose to be a bisexual person. If you have no answer, if you can't recollect you ever choosing to be heterosexual, then you can be sure that I can also never recollect choosing to be bisexual. But it is not a choice. It is biologically, it is accepted that sexual orientation is part of our human anatomy and makeup.
Okay, Linda, let's go back to Linda. I'll get back to you, Stephen. Some gay activists claim homophobia in Africa was encouraged by religions like Islam and Christianity. But is it not contradictory for the African culture to encourage polygamy while allowing homosexuality to be demonized?
Well, look, religion can be, as we know, in many places, many instances, completely contrary to what it says and what it does. I don't think, I mean, polygamy is, again, I have a grandfather who was polygamous. You know, I was born in England, and I tend not to favour polygamy. I can see why many women in parts of Africa and other parts of the world where polygamy is practiced are not happy about it. Stephen's views about women's rights cause me some concern, and goodness me, I believe in the right of every human being as a sovereign person, you know, in the sight of God, one with no more right or power than any other. That's my view. And so I have a problem with polygamy. I have a problem with the dogma in which the church tries to tell people how they should live their life, which is different to the sacred texts. So there are these problems, but we surely have to be a little tolerant and discuss these things with each other.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go back to Stephen on the phone. We were looking at homosexuality and politics. The British Prime Minister recently threatened to withdraw aid to homophobic developing nations, especially in Africa. Is it not blackmail, or should we call it interference in the country's sovereignty?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, it is. And I was pleased to see a lot of African nations, I think Ghana, Tanzania, Angola, Congo, Malawi, just stood up and said, Uganda said, well, you can keep your money. But so just going back to what Linda said, if you love your neighbour, it doesn't mean that you go along with everything that your neighbour does. And if your neighbour is doing something which is bad for them, bad for society, you've got a duty to warn them. If you've got somebody who's doing drugs or who's getting involved in destructive sexual practices like homosexuality, you've got a duty to warn them. Love is a doing word. And to get back to what Bisi was saying, there are people who say that they've had a homosexual feelings or orientation, or whatever they want to say, from a young age. But there's two things. Firstly, as an adult, you're responsible for how you live your life. Excuse me. And but secondly, there's no end of people now who've walked away from homosexuality. The ex-gay movement is massive now. Of course, it's the ministry which dare not speak its name, but it's huge.
Who funds it?
Is it not that same movement that is riddled with scandals?
Hold on a minute. Just please be quiet for a moment. You had just say the very existence of those people is a nail in the coffin of homosexual rights. Because if they're not born like it, if homosexuals are not born like it, then the whole gay rights agenda collapses. And,
What is the gay
and the
rights
people who
agenda?
walked away from
Okay,
homosexuality are
Stephen.
living testimony to the fact that nobody's born like it, and however you got to be gay, you don't have to stay gay.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Bisi,
I hope you're not an advert for heterosexuality, Stephen.
yeah, but Linda, we'll get back to you. Bisi
No,
asked a
come on.
question. Stephen just said something. Do your neighbor or anybody, even your parents, have the right to correct your sexuality?
It's interesting because, Stephen, I want you to know that while I was young, 3 times in my life I went through exorcism. The first time I put myself through it, that was early teen years, while I was struggling seriously with my sexuality. I went into church, I wanted to get rid of these, I went into fasting and all
You
those
felt
kind of
it was
things.
spiritual?
I felt it was spiritual, I felt I was cursed, and I just wanted to help myself. And when I was in my mid-20s, I discussed this with a friend of mine who took me to Celestial Church of Christ in Nigeria. And I was taken to the waterside, I was baptized, I was washed away. And then when my parents got to know about my sexuality, I went on to fasting again. And I want you to know something. If indeed there is a God, I've asked myself this question several times, Stephen. Is it that he doesn't care about me, one thing, or he doesn't care about my sexuality because he's got better things to deal with, or there is no God at all? Because if indeed there is a God, there should have been a cure for my sexuality. And talking about the ex-gay movement, it's interesting you raised this, but do you also know that this movement you raised is one movement that has been riddled with so much scandal of these ex-gay people having sex within themselves and then coming out again and saying, there is no cure to homosexuality. It's human, it's biological, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to Yemisi. People grow up seeing other people behaving like the opposite sex, like girls engaging in boys' activities. I'm sure you must have heard about tomboys and developing biceps in the process. And I've heard about boys also developing having a female voice. But like, there is a boy in the UK who recently had a sex change after 4 suicide attempts. The parents had to cough out about £20,000 to get him a sex change. But some kids grow up believing they are in the wrong body. Don't they have a right to change their sexuality?
I would say that, of course, every human being has a right to determine what affects their life, what impacts on their life, so far they are not harming another person. I have a right to seek happiness. I have a right to seek fulfillment. If my body structure, if the body I was born in is not giving me my fulfillment, I have a right to correct it. If I have an headache, I have a right to take aspirin. I have a right to seek the doctor and correct that headache. If my body structure is not giving me happiness, I have a right to seek medical help. And it is also about stereotypes, gender stereotypes, people believing that this masculine, this feminine, this is how you should be. I think that people should just be free to be who they are within themselves and be happy about themselves. If I want to lose weight, I lose weight for me. If I want to be a boy and look like a boy, I do it for me. And if I want to grow a second hand, if I lost one hand and I want to grow a second, I do it for me. So far, I'm not harming another person in the process. I think that should be our watchword. We should allow people. Giving me rights or equal rights does not take away from your rights to be who you are. It only means you cannot perpetuate your hatred or bigotry against me. So my asking for human rights, my equal rights to be who I am, to be a transvestite, to be openly bisexual, to be openly homosexual, is not going to take away from your right to be heterosexual. It's only going to say that you have no right to perpetrate your bigotry, your hatred, or impose your religious laws on me as a human being.
Okay, let's go back to BC quickly. More sub-Saharan Africans are using the homosexuality joker to get asylum in Europe, in spite of the fact that countries like Nigeria and Cameroon are yet to prosecute people for this, though their national assemblies are doing something about it. Is the issue not giving the African continent more bad publicity?
If the bad publicity is what we need to challenge the notion that we have, why don't we just roll on it? You see, it's very interesting you raised this issue. But before I go to that, I want to also highlight something you said. The fact that, nobody has been prosecuted in Cameroon, which is wrong. because there are 11 men in prison in Cameroon
right now.
There are 19.
But the government is claiming, the Minister of Information in
That's
Cameroon
wrong.
is claiming that they've not prosecuted, they've not
prosecuted them, but
they
they put them in prison. The same is happening in the Gambia. There are 19 people in prison in the Gambia now. And the interesting thing about the case of the Gambia is that the Gambian police raided a party, and they said, accused the people of an intent to commit. They did not commit anything. They were in a party. They were accused of an intent to commit because they heard from information that they're having a gay party. Now, to now come back to the issue of, asylum, seeking asylum.
Seekers,
yeah. The issue of homosexuality has become the survivor of the fittest. More and more gay people are looking for a place to live a fulfilled life. And if I find myself in Europe, and I realize that the country I find myself is tolerant, is ready to give me the opportunity to live my life the way I want to live my life, I would take that opportunity. I would make that choice and say, okay, I will stay here and, find a life for myself.
Yeah, but basically what the issue is that even the British Home Office wanted to deport a Cameroonian back home because they got evidence that he was lying, using homosexuality as a joker to stay back in the UK.
It's interesting you mentioned the Home Office. I have worked with the Home Office. I have been on I've done so many campaigns to stop many people from being deported. And several times I've written to the Home Office,
But what about the people who are using it? They are not homosexual. They're using it.
They will continue to use it if the Home Office refuse to engage with people like Yemisi or people like myself who are from that continent, who came into this country because of the persecution, who understand what it is, the dynamics of LGBT movement in back home in Nigeria. If Home Office is not engaging people like us in the process of checking whether somebody is real or fake, they will continue to give the wrong people asylum to stay in this country and deport the right people. I worked on a case, the boy was deported. I got a text message from him today. He has not seen his family 3 months after he's deported because he couldn't go back home because they're not going to allow him to go back.
Stephen, let's look at people with genetic issues. A man who has maybe female hormones, or a woman who has male hormones. At least there are evidence to show that people have the opposite sex hormones. Would you blame him or her for his or her natural feelings or condition?
Look, this whole idea of some sort of genetic basis for homosexuality, which I know Yemis is very, very big on. She's saying that sexual orientation is something we're all born with, and that researchers think that there's indisputable evidence that it's not a matter of choice. Well, actually, I don't know any of those researchers, and the people like Simon LeVay who've done research on desperately trying to find the gay gene, they've all come up empty-handed. And so there can be an element of nature in that the sort of things that might deeply affect one person will run like water off a duck's back to another. But in all the homosexual life stories that you come across, quite often there's an absent parent of the same sex, or there's some sexual abuse, or there's something going on.
Well, that's nothing going on.
Hold on a minute. Hang on a minute. And there's absolutely no evidence at all of any genetic link in any responsible scientist or body of evidence that I know of. And I've been researching this subject for a long, long time. Look, the pressure for gay rights in Africa is not coming from Africans. It's coming from rich Westerners. And part of the drive, I'm not saying all of it, but part of the drive is that they'd like some new exotic places to go on holiday and to be able to seduce local young people. And you can laugh, but I know that in Kenya, and I'm sure on the western coast of Africa as well, that is a reality of rich Italians, Germans, British going out there and corrupting local young people. And that, I'm afraid, is why Africa has to stand firm against people like David Cameron and these people in the studio who want to legalize.
I wish Africa had stood firm when sodomy laws was brought into Africa.
I'm prepared to go and share my evidence with anybody who wants to know about it anywhere in the world.
Okay. Let's get back to the studio.
Don't start talking about genes. Don't enter into it. As far as I'm concerned, we make choices. We make choices, including people who make choices not to have sex with anybody. They become celibate. They choose to do that. There are people who choose. I chose to be a lesbian, not from a whim, but out of desire. And there are many other people in Nigeria, in Botswana, in Kenya, all over the world, about 10% of every population in the world will have people whose sexual preferences are for their own gender.
I don't know where you got that from, Linda. Was that from
Okay,
Kinsey?
let's move away.
Stephen,
Stephen,
it's vanishingly small in Africa.
Stephen, let's move away from that for now. Let's hear from Bisi, his experience at the University of Lagos some years back, and also looking at the authorities trying to deny you of your certificate and the students also trying to lynch you one way or the other. Can you quickly tell us about that? Maybe you could share that with us.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting you brought this up. You know, I struggled a lot in the university when I was there. That was even before I came out. And it was really bad. That the one incident that, you know, stayed in my memory for long was a night I was going back to my hostel, and a friend of mine came across me and said, "Don't go back to your room tonight because you're going to get lynched." And I thought he was joking, but he said, "You should not go back to your room tonight. You're going to get lynched." So I was staying with a friend, and I went to another friend's house, and I called my friend and said, "Don't go back to the hostel." He went, and the next morning, he was lynched. He was beaten so much that they punched him with the tip of a pen. That was how bad the experience was. And then
with the authorities,
I was prosecuted for being gay. Now, and said I brought that upon myself. You know, I had to face the school panel. They almost wanted to take away my university degree from me. It was a struggle. I had to deal with, you know, facing panel, writing my exams, finishing my exams, and then having to wait to get my certificate. All for what? Just for being gay. I did not commit any offense.
Okay, let me ask a general question now. Let me start with Linda. Linda, yeah, do you think the African society would ever embrace homosexuality with the way things are going? Even in the studio, we are feeling the heat.
Well, we have fundamentalism in the world. It has grown. We had, there was a much more liberal view about rights and responsibilities for individuals in the world. This is what the struggle against colonialism was about. And we seem to be going backwards both here in the United States of America and in Africa and in Asia. And so I'm not very optimistic at present. But what goes around comes around. And the fact is that people do, and we have Twitter, we have ways of communicating, we can at least recognize we're not alone and that we have rights. This is a good thing. I don't want to force my sexual orientation down anybody else's throat. Everybody should be free to be as they wish, and it will happen despite the fundamentalists wanting to turn the clock back to the Stone Ages.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, notwithstanding people like Stephen's view of persecution of homosexuals, do you think this is ever justified, as in persecuting homosexuals in Africa? Linda?
Me? Of course not. Absolutely not. Persecuting anybody, anywhere. I mean, let's be clear. Also, disabled people are persecuted. You know, it's not simply that something that happens to one group of people. In a society filled with hate and fear, people who are different are often targeted and picked on. And it's wrong.
Okay, Stephen?
Yes.
Yeah. Your last take on the issue. What do you think is the way out from people still persecuting other people over their view?
Look, nobody's persecuted. I mean, you might equally say that that thieves are persecuted or perjurers are persecuted. There has to be a rule of law, and people were moaning about Uganda's law against sodomy, which has the death penalty. But there's also the death penalty in Uganda for rape, and nobody says, "Oh, you're persecuting rapists," because there has to be a rule of law. And the Lord Jesus said, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female, and for this reason shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh. And being one flesh in that full physical and emotional sense is something a pair of homosexual men or a pair of lesbians can never do.
Okay, on the final note, let me just talk to...
Please.
Yeah, let me talk to Yemisi in the studio. On the final note, Yemisi, the way out, even we have to incorporate views of people like Stephen or others who don't believe in it. What do you think will bring about unity in the society, especially African society?
I think the important thing will be to recognize that everybody is equal in rights and dignity. irrespective of your gender, irrespective of your race, irrespective of your geographical location. We are all human beings, first and foremost, before any tax, before you're a Christian, before I'm a woman, before you're a Muslim, before you are an atheist, before you are heterosexual or homosexual. We are first and foremost human beings, and that is where I derive my fundamental rights from.
Okay,
It
thank
is
you.
as human beings, and that should be respected.
Okay, Linda, final words from you.
I'm with Yamishi, what she just said. The human rights of everybody needs to be respected. I will fight for the rights of other people, even the people with whom I don't agree, and I want my rights respected in law. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is to be supported internationally, and there's no exceptions for Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. And Stephen, your final words quickly on this issue.
Yes, well, on that matter of just for the human rights law, there is no human right to commit sodomy. When the Human Rights Act was framed in the 1940s, it was absolutely inconceivable that there would be a demand for it to be extended to cover homosexuals. Now, Africans are right to regard homosexuality with horror, and I just hope and pray that Africa will stand firm, even in the face of David Cameron's bullying.
Okay, and to Bisi, just your final words on what you think will bring about unity over this issue.
I would like to end by with the words of one of the most famous and most political musician from the continent of Africa, Fela Anikulapo Kuti. When he talked about human rights, he said, "Anima one dash me human rights, not my property." So I think, Stephen, with that, if you know that man very well, is a very strong man, you will believe that as a human being, the right to the dignity of my body is my right.
Okay.
And I do not need to beg you to respect that.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming on the show. We hope to have you some other time. You can continue the debate on Twitter at hotseat_Vox. Also join us at facebook.com/hotseat on Vox. Email us hotseat@voxafrica.com to leave your comments or suggestions. You can also watch all previous editions of this program on our website, voxafrica.com/hotseat. Next week, the portrayal of Africa in the Western media has always angered Africans. So next Friday on the debate, we are asking, has the old image of Africa being a continent of starving children, conflict, and poverty in the Western media changed? Join us then. From me, it's good night.